Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Broadcasting live from our Sanctum Sanctorum in Venice, California. This is the Sixth Sense Society. I'm your host, Krista, here with our producer, Michael, and today we are going to share our stories about what it's like to live a magical life, doing tarot readings and setting things up the way we want. We have tons of stories because we've been at this since we first met in 1996. So we're really excited to be able to share these stories with you, and you can get to know us a little bit more. But before we get started, Michael has a few announcements.
Hi, everybody, and I'm really looking forward to you guys getting to know us a little bit better today. I know people have asked about it, so it's going to be a lot of fun. We've got some great shows coming up next month. We're going to have Jason Miller. We're going to have more esoteric stuff, so it should be awesome. You can get all the information on our website, sixthsensesociety.com, SIXTH, all spelled out. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe and like. It really helps us tremendously, so that's a great thing to do. If you're on the website and you feel so inclined and you want to buy us a coffee on Ko-Fi to help us cover some of our production costs, we much appreciate that as well. But we love doing the show for you guys, and we plan on continuing for the foreseeable future. And then if you're out and about and you can't join us with the video, you can always catch us as a podcast after the show on Spotify and iTunes, and just search Sixth Sense Society, and we are pretty easy to find. So I'm not going to take up too much of your time because I know we want to get into this. So I'm going to kick it back to Krista. So take it away, Krista.
Great. So in previous shows, we have touched base with some of our stories, particularly the story about how we became interested in the tarot. So we did talk a little bit about our time in Halifax, Nova Scotia, where Michael and I first met. So I thought maybe we could start talking a little more about our drive across country once we decided we were going to leave Halifax and come out to California, where both my parents lived in different areas. And we did share like maybe one story, but it was really quite an adventure. And when we left, we were very naive about how much money we would need. I remember that we would have had only like $500, but my friend Lainey gave me $100. Plus, for some reason, we only had one sleeping bag, and she gave me a sleeping bag because we were going to camp out. We were leaving sort of late fall, I believe it was. So we were going to drive south so that we'd miss some of the cold weather and just find campgrounds. We didn't plan them. We didn't, of course, have cell phones at that time. Neither of us had a credit card. And Michael had this cute little Jeep that we drove across country. It was really exhilarating, though. I think there was only like one time I got nervous, and we'll talk about that at some point. But that's what we started out doing. And we actually thought, I think we would maybe be able to do some readings along the way, which absolutely never panned out. So what kind of stories did you want to share about our trip, Michael?
Well, actually it was, we're sitting in a pub in Halifax, and it's like suddenly there's this inspiration, let's go to California and visit your folks, which made no sense, but we decided to do that. And I just remember us, packing the little Jeep with whatever would fit, selling off and giving away everything else. And off we set, like you said, with $600 to our name to travel all the way across North America. And when you think about it, that's probably a pretty silly thing to do. But, again, I think we were already living a magical life at that point, and we just kind of trusted that the universe would provide, and it sort of did. But I think that one of my favorite stories is that the day, and this is, of course, 22 years ago. So we didn't have DVRs and all that good stuff like they have today. If you missed a show, you missed it on TV. And we were very, very into the show Millennium back in the day that Chris Carter produced, and with Lance Henriksen was the star. And so we ended up, we were counting our pesos, and we were down to our last few dollars, but we had just enough to rent a cheap motel room in Barstow, California on a Friday night so we could have a TV to watch Millennium so we didn't miss an episode. And we literally spent the last money we had on Earth almost. And I mean, by the time we got to Krista's mother's place, we didn't even have enough left for a tank of gas. So it was we just made it. But that was important to us, and we really wanted to watch the show. So many years later, through a mutual friend, David Oman, who's been on the show, we ended up meeting Lance, and we told him the story, and that Krista was a tarot reader. He says, I love readings. Can I get a reading from you? And they spent the next hour hanging out together, and it was such a magical thing, and he was so nice to her. But it was such a completion, and he was so impressed that we would literally spend our last $20 we had to our name just to watch his show, so we didn't miss it. So that was probably one of my favorite memories.
Well, that's one of my favorite too, because I actually wished to be able to read for him. And along the way, we were joking around, Michael and I, and we sort of wished out loud, what sort of movie star would you like to read for? And I just loved him as Frank Black. He just was such a cool character. And that's really the only thing I knew Lance Hendrickson in. And I it took many years for that to happen. And I used to check on it with the tarot cards. And I thought it'd always say it would happen. And I remember thinking, like, it's never going to happen, And the way it all happened was so magical. And so that was a very important sort of test for me with how magic works and how you have to let go of the timing, because obviously it had to be good for him, because it turns out he's really into readings. I think his wife is an astrologer. So he really probably needed that reading at that time. So that was one of my favorites. Another thing that happened to us, we stayed in a lot of different campgrounds, and we stayed at this one called Red Rock Canyon, and that was, I think, in Oklahoma. Is that correct, that Michael?
Yeah, that was in Oklahoma. We just maybe 45 minutes or so this side of Oklahoma City.
Yes, and it was still pretty warm. We found this field. I slept so well. It was so beautiful and peaceful. We did have a tent, and the next day there were these sort of like showers you could use, facilities that were open still. And so we needed one person to stay with the car just in case some straggler came along. And so one of us would go in and take a shower, and then the other person next would. And we didn't talk to each other in between exchanging our roles. But when I was in the shower, I suddenly felt really creeped out. And it was a clean place. We'd slept beautifully. I kept like stopping and looking out from the shower curtain. I felt this weird energy, and then I quickly finished up. And then for some reason, after Michael was done, we decided to talk, and we both had a similar experience.
Yeah, it was really weird because it was such a wonderful place. The other thing that was cool about that, you talk about living a magical life, or trusting the universe to provide and all that good stuff, was that if you remember, it was in November, so it was early November, it was off season. And as we pulled in, there was a sign saying, go ahead and camp. And in the morning, the park ranger, whoever will be around to collect your camping fee, which was, I don't know, $12 or $15 or whatever. And so we waited, and the person never showed up. So we finally said, screw it. We just packed up and left. But had he come down and taken our fee, we would have run out of money for the gas before we got to your mother's place, because we had just enough. I mean, we literally had $10 or less in our pocket, when we landed at your mother's place. So that would have bankrupted us. So I thought, see, the universe had our back the entire way.
I totally forgot about that. But didn't you find out later that was an area there had been a massacre of Indians?
Not so much, but it's, again, those little box canyons, God knows what happened there, right? But I remember it was so funny because, as I said, we were in such good moods, and we had such a good night's sleep. The ground was so soft and everything. It was wonderful. And then Krista never said anything. She came out of the shower, and I was going to wait outside for her just, to be safe and keep an eye on things. And so she went in and had her shower and came out, said nothing. And I went in, and I just had these violent feelings and images and things in my head. It just felt like horrible, which was weird because I'd been in such a good mood walking into the shower. So when I came out, I said, Krista, this weird thing happened. She's like, guess what? It happened to me too. So it was really quite awesome. And again, maybe there was an impression there from whatever violent things happened before or whatever. The other thing I remember is when we were traveling, as we got to Oklahoma City, and of course this was after Timothy McVeigh and all the terrorism blowing up the building, is you could still feel that very heavy energy from that. And that I really emotionally experienced as well.
Yeah, that's true. That was very close in time to that. I remember going through Texas too and seeing that huge cross and feeling like whatever part of Texas we were going through, we felt a little creeped out by. And we didn't feel like we'd be welcome as tarot card readers and witches. And so we kind of rushed through that area.
Yeah, I remember thinking, dear God, please don't let our old car break down here. And maybe if I go a little faster and if something happens, we can coast to New Mexico. Because it was in, again, on the radio channels, it's like country music and Rush Limbaugh, and they're advertising the biggest cross in the Western Hemisphere or something. And like, us with our long hair and our tarot cards on the dash, we're probably not going to get a good reception here. So please don't let us break down here. It was funny.
That's so true. So then we got to California. We did go to Sonoma to visit my mother first, and we had wanted to be able to work up there, but we realized we couldn't. And I think by then we'd heard about Oceanfront Walk, where you could set up as any kind of a tarot card reader for free. And my dad living in LA, we thought, we should go there. And reluctantly, for me, we went to LA. And I think even at the time, we never really planned on staying here for many, many years. We thought we'd be here, maybe 3 years, or we even thought we could go back and forth, which was very idealistic. So anyway, we get to LA, and my mom gave me a little bit of money, and my dad let us stay with him for a little while, but he didn't really have much money. So we had to get any kind of jobs we could. And we were at the same time trying to set up as readers. But I initially got this job doing those signatures for petitions, which is a really dreadful job. But it was an interesting thing because it led to getting an apartment that really we could afford and was actually in the right area for us. Because when I took the job, I took it. One reason, I just needed some cash. And then I'd had a dream the night before with a shark in it. And I very rarely, sort of dream about sharks, believe it or not. And there was this shark copy paper in when I went to interview. And I just felt it was a weird coincidence. So I thought, well, I'll take this job for now until we can set up as readers. And it was through one of the people there that I found the right apartment to move into. So I just felt that was really, I didn't know what else to do because it was getting hard to find an apartment that was not horrible, even in the 90s, that we could afford. And so we initially moved into Lincoln Place in a room, but it was still at least the right area for us.
Yeah, and it kind of brings me up a point, really, when we talk about magic, and if you're going to live a magical life and trust magic and do spells and magic, is that I think a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that I can just do a spell and then sit back on my butt and everything good will happen. And honestly, I keep telling people magic is supposed to enhance effort, not replace effort. So yes, we trusted the universe to provide. We did some spell work and to try and create some prosperity. But at the same time, we worked our butts off. We dragged ourselves. I dragged my all stuff down to the beach and set up to do readings and try and make a little money. Krista did a job that she actually kind of hated for a while, but it paid the bills. So in a sense, you got to try and help yourself too. And I don't think that magic works very well if you're not going to take the practical steps. And I was just reading, rereading some of Magic in Theory and Practice by Crowley, and he very much talks about that, the idea that, yes, you do your spells and all that good stuff, but you also have to do all the physical work. There's no point in praying for justice if somebody steals your pocket watch if you don't bother to call the police. And so you got to do the work, guys. You can't just sort of do the magic and sit on your butts.
It's so true. And one of the things, though, that I found when I was thinking about how I found the right place, the right bookstore, was sometimes this information would drop into my mind that I had overheard. So for instance, the way I found the Bodhi Tree bookstore was because I'd worked at Mirabai Books in Woodstock, New York, which is still around, a very cute sort of metaphysical store. It was owned by Ann Roberts at the time, and I'd worked there, and I had a really good experience. And I remember her going on and on about this bookstore called Bodhi Tree Bookstore. It was a very famous, successful, independent bookstore. And that's all I remember that she said. So when we got out here, and then I was starting to feel like, I needed any kind of a job, I thought, well, I've worked in a bookstore. I'm going to go to the Bodhi Tree bookstore. And then also we wanted to try and see if we could be readers there. But I think initially they weren't even interested in it. And then I went back thinking like, okay, I can at least work as a clerk here because I'll get better money and I'll enjoy it more than this petition work. But it just sort of dropped in my head, go to Bodhi Tree bookstore. And when I think about it, there were other bookstores, plenty of bookstores I could have gone to that would have at least hired me as a clerk. And that one just sort of rang in my head. And I think that's part of, magic, is really listening to the what comes to your mind first. What is it that you're thinking about? And then, just like Michael said, putting in the effort to, go there and do what you can to connect to it.
Yeah, and I'm very grateful for the Bodhi Tree. They definitely gave us our start in LA, which was awesome, and helped us to get established. Now, having said that, we still had to build up our clientele and get people to trust us and so forth. And I think consistency, putting in the legwork, is just a part of being successful, whether you're doing magic or not. And so for us, again, I think we've always had a great work ethic. And even with our current readings and stuff, one of the things about it is I've often said that I never take a reading off, in the sense that when I'm doing a reading for somebody, I want it to be the best reading I can do for them. And we've always had that attitude, and I think that that's made a difference. And I think that really, to be successful, whether it's as a reader or anything else, I think it's the three things that make you successful in anything. I think it's having some vision and some creativity so that you can imagine possibilities. I think it's having a good attitude so people enjoy you and want to connect with you and work with you. And I think it's having a strong work ethic. And I think if you have those three things, then the magic just enhances it. And the magic makes it that much better. But for me, again, that's what it takes to make life work. And I think we've always had those things.
It's true. It's about grounding the magic in different ways. Though I will say the Bodhi Tree bookstore was a very strange way that we started there on some level. And there was a lot of interesting synchronicities. So when I found out they didn't want us as readers, I remember I kind of lost touch with, I think I did file, I did sort of fill out something for a clerk, but then they didn't get back to me. So then we had moved to Venice Beach, and they actually tracked me down from my father's house to where we were at Venice to see if I still wanted to work as a clerk. So this wasn't too long. It was months, not years. And I remember that the day I actually started working there as a clerk would have been one of my brother's birthdays, David, who's very significant in my life. So it was January 27th. Even then I remember thinking well, that's odd. I had sort of really given up hope that they were going to hire us as readers, because they didn't show any sign that they were interested. And so Michael had started reading on the Oceanfront Walk, which she'll share some stories about. I would read only a little bit there, and then I was working full-time as a clerk at the Bodhi Tree bookstore. And I remember, however, when I gave a recommendation there, because the only one I had was one from Vanessa from Little Mysteries, and it was an amazing recommendation about us as readers. And I gave that as my just recommendation to work there as a clerk. And Phil read it, and I could see he really was impressed that another store owner had these opinions about us as readers. And he even sort of said, well, maybe you will be a reader here someday, or something, kind of chuckled. But I actually let go after a while, because they didn't show any signs. And I just said, I'm going to work as a clerk for now. And I like bookstores anyway. But I do think that recommendation had made an impression on Phil. And then when Michael's talking about how hardworking we are, I'm a very hard worker, and I know they really liked me as an employee. They trusted me, and they could see I was very responsible, and then they met Michael through me. So I really think that was one of the reasons they decided to take a chance on having readers there, because I know they were concerned. They'd had one reader only ever before, who only worked on the used bookstore porch, and I think that went well, but he'd gone off to bigger things, and they hadn't had anyone for years. And many people had tried. Linda Michaels, I know, who became one of the readers, had kept after them to do readings there, but it was only until we came there that we were the impetus, the catalyst to make it happen. And very soon, I mean, we organized it all, and very soon I became in charge of the hiring of the readers there. So we do feel like we were the main force, and it was the timing that sort of changed their minds about having readings there. And it was a very important thing for us, because it did establish us in LA in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I think that's advice I always give readers when they're starting out. We get young people that are just getting into it, and they kind of want advice. And it's like, you know what, bookstores and everything, that's great, but there's so many possibilities these days, and for example, in Halifax, and we may have talked to this in a previous show, but there's a wonderful historic properties. It's these places on the waterfront. There were old warehouses and stuff that they've remade them into restaurants and shops and pubs. And there was a little grassy knoll there with a little wooden retaining wall. And so we would go down and we would take a piece of plywood, we'd cover it with some fabric. We had a little lantern, little sign, readings, $20 or whatever it was. And we'd sit on the wooden wall and the person would sit next to us, and it was in the tourist season. And we would start at 6:30 at night, and at 2:00 in the morning, we'd often have people still waiting in line for a reading, And so to me, there are coffee shops, there are all kinds of cool places where you can read, and bookstores. One of the downsides with bookstores sometimes is with other readers is it can certainly get into the politics and a little bit of nitpicking and backstabbing stuff, unfortunately. And I think as a brand new reader, I'm not sure you really need to deal with all of that. So I think, use your imagination, like I said, and find a place that you can make uniquely yours, where you can really get some experience and not have to deal with all of the other stuff that goes with it sometimes with bookstores. And I think that that's just a wonderful way to get into the business. That's kind of how we did it.
It's true. And also doing a lot of readings early on is really, really good. You have to build a muscle, but you will. But one of the things I've learned as a tarot card reader, and also probably one of our advantages, is we've done so many, many, many readings that, you can't replace that with knowledge. The experience of working with so many different kinds of people from different kinds of walks of life, it really teaches you what works and what doesn't work, which I know I've talked about before. But trying to do maybe a lot of readings in the beginning just to build your muscle and really get a lot of experience under your belt, I think is very important. And if you, for instance, start off new and you're charging a very high rate, you're not going to get as many people. So try to start off with a moderate rate, or at least if you feel like you really need to charge that, then maybe do some pro bono readings at charity events, which can also be a great way to stretch your muscles. And we did do that. I think I talked about that before.
Yeah, we used to do a lot of events for the LA Free Clinic and stuff, and they would call us every year, and we would go down and volunteer our time for them. It was a good cause, and we still think it's a great cause. And we've done some charity events and stuff like that too, which I think is just good for us. It's a way of giving back. But yeah, there are always opportunities to do things like that. And so for me, but kind of find your own path. It's really about what works for you. And there's no, you could be doing readings in a tattoo shop, wherever it is. And I think that you can make it your own, which I think is a wonderful way to jump into things, and kind of what we did. And then also you just kind of got to believe in magic a little bit, we do, and we certainly practice. But at the same time, we've always kind of felt the universe would provide. Back in the day, I remember when the Bodhi Tree was, long before they were talking about potentially closing. And Krista said, if this place ever closed, since it's a big part of our income, what will we do without it? And I said, I have no idea, but I know we would do something, because we always end up doing something. The universe always finds a way to create another door to open for us. And we just kind of have faith in that. And I think that a big part of magic is having faith in it.
It's true. It's having that kind of confidence that it works, and having faith and being open to sort of when it works and how it works. There was one other aspect that I wanted to mention magically. When we first came to LA, we would sometimes have these, when we felt a little depressed that we were not making progress as quickly as we thought we would, we'd have these messages from completely random strangers. And the one I remember, and there's a couple, there's one that maybe Michael remembers a little bit more, but the one I remembered was the woman who was an African-American woman that Michael would read for free sometimes on the oceanfront walk. And she was sometimes homeless and sometimes not. And she had some abilities, it seems like. And I had given up, thinking that Bodhi Tree would ever hire us. And then she sat down with Michael one day and said, they're going to call you in. You're going to be the readers there. It's going to happen this particular, like in a couple weeks. And Michael came home and he told me, I said, nah, that's just crazy. She was absolutely 100% right. It happened exactly the way she said it. It was unbelievable. And it was unsolicited. Michael did not solicit. I had given up on being a reader there. We were hoping to build it up on Oceanfront Walk more. And we had other people like that would sometimes just come out of the crowd and say something encouraging.
Yeah, and I think magic is always around you in life if you're open to it, and you'll always get your messages and your signs from wherever they need to come from. And a good example of an exercise that I think you can do if you believe in magic. And I want to give a shout out to Mark Metzen, our friend, if he's listening back in Halifax. And I remember him telling this story that he would step outside of his door one day a week, and he would look for a sign. It could be a swizzle stick pointing in like an arrow in a certain direction. He'd say, "Okay, that's the direction I'm supposed to go." And he would then go that direction and listen and watch for his next sign, which could be two people talking about that coffee shop over there. He said, "I guess I'm supposed to go have a coffee at the coffee shop." And so he would spend all day just in a magical state, allowing the universe to be his guide, with no expectations, with no ideas, with no preconceived idea of what he should be doing or where he should be going. And he said he just discovered amazing things. He had amazing experiences. But it's a wonderful example of how you can just trust in magic, you know.
Yeah, I think it's really true. And I think people have moments like that and they just think it's an anomaly rather than, I do remember a little bit from Terence McKenna's talk about intuition, the idea that the universe is far, far different than what we realize. And, because he initially sort of took psychedelics to open his mind, but somehow he managed to also see it without it, so that gives people sometimes a jump start, though you do have to be extremely careful with it. But once you begin to see more and more that it's actually a reality, then you start to trust it more, and then you can expand your confidence to take sort of larger leaps of faith. And if you don't sometimes take that leap of faith, don't beat yourself up, because we're all on this journey battling wrong views about the universe.
Yeah, for sure. And but at the same time, I do think that why practice magic if you don't believe in it? And sometimes I think with that, you do have to be able to take that little crazy leap of faith where you just trust that the net will appear and all that kind of stuff. And we've kind of always done that to a degree, I think, and that we've also always been people that I think believe that everything is possible. We don't limit our possibilities all that much. But at the same time, the practical part of it, like I said, that doesn't mean you don't take a job at the grocery store to help pay bills if it's offered, because maybe that's part of the magic, is giving you that opportunity to get to the next day before the bigger thing can come along. So I think, you have to be able to embrace the magical world, but kind of wrap that in a little bit of reality at the same time, maybe.
Well, I totally agree. I don't think we would have become the Bodhi Tree readers if I hadn't taken a job first as a clerk there. For whatever reason, they were very, very reluctant to have readers there. And some of it was because of their clientele being so famous. And they were known for the fact that they did not bother the rich Hollywood people or the musicians that came into the store. So Prince could come into the store, which he did, and nobody would bother him. That was, once in a while one of the clerks would go up and say something to one of their, someone they admired, but in a very polite and respectful way. They weren't trying to get the paparazzi there. So they had this clientele they'd built, and they didn't want, I think, a psychic that could maybe misuse that or maybe predict that you're cursed and now pay me $10,000. So I think that the Bodhi Tree is a great example. If I trusted that I'm gonna work there, that it was the right decision, even though I didn't know how much of a good decision that was until, it wasn't that long. I think it was, in fact, I found the date we started. It was November 5th of 1998 that we officially started as readers, but I still kept working part-time as a clerk there for several more years because we had to build up our clientele. So I think Michael's absolutely right about that you still have to sort of, be practical sometimes, but that doesn't mean you give up and just, maybe only be practical or you give up on your magic.
Yeah, and keep in mind, too, that if you're going to do a spell for something, and I'm a big fan of keeping it broad. I'm not sort of a big fan of I want a specific job or a specific person. It's more I want to be in love. I want to feel fulfilled. I want to be successful, and just kind of letting the universe have a little room to play. And I think that with that, I think it becomes more magical. So for me, I've often told people, if you're going to live a magical life, try not to outthink the universe. Try not to micromanage it. But just trust that things can happen in ways that you're not always anticipating. And I think that you also have to really do a good job of trusting your gut, your instincts. Something feels right, something doesn't feel right. Even if it makes sense or not, that doesn't really matter. I feel drawn to this for some reason, or I don't feel drawn to that. And I think sometimes we really kind of have to trust that as well.
I think that's very true. I totally agree with all of that. So one of the other things I wanted to share is a couple of the stories about when we first started doing parties as readers. So one of the nice things about the Bodhi Tree is if they got people calling in about parties to hire readers, they just gave us the referral. They never, because we were sort of a side gig for them. They never really built it up. They just had extra income. They were very particular about who worked there. We never even did phone readings there. And so they would just say, hey, you guys, here's a number, you can call them. And so Daryl Butler, who was working at the Bodhi Tree as one of the readers with us at the beginning, she had gotten something about the rap party for the X-Files, and they needed a bunch of readers. They had, tons of readers. So we got hired for that. And I believe it was our very first big party. And there was just tons of people in line, and we were hired, I think it was maybe for 3 hours. It wasn't so, it was our first party though, we didn't know we could stop. And so if you ever work large parties as readers, you know that it will just go on forever unless you get up and leave. And so we sat there nonstop for 6 hours. I kid you not, both of us, Michael and I, because the lines, and they had a lot of readers, but it was a huge party. And I was getting very sort of high from it, from all the readings. And so I remember going into the bathroom thinking like, I feel great, and finally someone told us we could leave. And then I looked in the mirror and I had these huge dark circles under my eyes. I had not realized how tapped out I was. So usually it's the next day you get this, we call it the psychic hangover. So we learned kind of the hard way that we have to be the ones to, either say, hey, do you want us to keep going, and are you going to pay us more? And because a lot of times you just can't do everybody in the room, that there's just not enough readers, even if you're doing really quick readings, which we were. But I'll never forget that one, because we literally, I don't think I didn't take a bathroom break. I just literally worked 6 hours straight.
Yeah, I remember my first gig where we did an event like that in Halifax was with Little Mysteries, the bookstore that was there that our friend Vanessa owned. And she was having a fundraiser for something, and she knew I was getting into tarot and doing some readings. So she said, would you like to do some readings at this fundraiser for me? And I'm like, sure, why not? But I'd never had the experience where I had to read for one person after the next, after the next, after the next for several hours and just get bombarded like that. And at the end of it, I couldn't even friggin' drive home. I had to get somebody to drive me home. I was so wasted. So it was a real experience. But again, over time doing those events, you get stronger. You kind of get used to it, and so it's not as taxing. But then again, we do the thing like the X-Files, and now they have you sitting next to a rock band, and you have to yell at the person the reading all night long. And trust me, that gets really exhausting. So yeah, it can be an experience, but it's a lot of fun. And we've done readings in such cool places. One Wilshire downtown in LA, the big office tower, the Queen Mary in Long Beach. Obviously movie stars' homes and for their birthdays and stuff, where we've read for celebrities. And we don't name drop, so you guys don't ask because we're not going to tell you. We just think people deserve their privacy. And just really cool places. And it's always been a lot of fun. And it's been an adventure. I think our whole life around this has just been an absolute adventure.
It has. And I do remember also, it is memorable the first time you work a large Hollywood party. And if you're in an LA and you're halfway decent, you will work a Hollywood party at some point. So that's not necessarily unusual. It was unusual for me as a person because I've never been a very starstruck person. So even though I really wanted to read for Lance Hendrickson, it was because of his character on Millennium, and I just really loved that character so much. And so I'm very particular about who I really like, and I'm not wowed by the stars necessarily, but I will say my first party that Michael and I worked, and there were a lot of really A-star actors waiting in line in beautiful gowns. I remember thinking, like, I can't believe these people think I have something to say to them. Like, I'm usually quite invisible in the world. And I thought it was the universe having a good laugh with me, like, haha, Krista, now you're going to, be heard.
Yeah, it's really funny, to do your first event like that. And I look over and there's Krista doing readings, and there's A-list, celebrities that are hanging on her every word, and she's the center of attention. I thought, that's just surreal. That just is strange. So because you would think anywhere else, they would be the center of attention. So it was really, really awesome. But honestly, with a lot of celebrity people that we've read for, they're just nice people. Some of the people are people. And some of them are awesome. We've had rich people that are wonderful, rich people that are not. We've had poor people that are wonderful and poor people that are not. So for me, people are just people, and everyone has the same concerns. They want to be happy, they want to feel fulfilled. They want to be in love, so nothing makes you any different. I think everybody has those basic desires in life. And as I said, we've had some wonderful experiences, which I'm very grateful for.
I am too. And it is, I have to admit, as a tarot card reader and a magical person, it's nice to be able to get a glimpse into all kinds of lives, which you really do, which I remember our friend Mark was saying that, Mark Metzen from Halifax was saying how a real witch can walk in many worlds. And it kind of stuck with me, like, oh yeah, so you can walk in an ordinary world, or walk in the world of celebrity, or walk in a world of sports. And so one of the things that the tarot has done for me is it has allowed me to glimpse into these worlds. Because I remember once, I think I said this in the show, I read for a hockey player who was an enforcer, and I so enjoyed, I got this time with this young man, listening to his issues that were going on in hockey for him. And you get these people that you don't normally get contact with just as an ordinary person like me. And you spend meaningful time with them, very succinct, but very meaningful time.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just been a blessing, the people that we've met along the way, rich and not rich, famous and not famous, but just the incredible people that we've met along the way. It's made this journey so much more exciting and fulfilling, and it's a wonderful life, in that respect. And I think that I can't imagine, and here we are now, we're 22, 23, 24 years into being readers, and we've done probably 30, 40,000 readings, and yet I still look forward to it. I still really enjoy the people I work with, and it's really fun when you feel like you might have made a difference in someone's life. Is really fulfilling. And there have definitely been times where people call us up and say, look, not sure I would have gotten through that time without you guys, and it really helped. And so to me, that's very gratifying.
That is probably the best compliment I can ever get from someone. And I've mentioned this before. It's really kind of fun to hit something on the nail psychically or timing. But when someone comes back and thanks you and said that you really helped and comforted them through difficult times, I usually want to cry. And because I know what that has been for me in my life when someone has been there in that capacity. And to be, allowed to do that and to really have succeeded is probably the most gratifying, I think, being a reader.
Yeah, for sure. And then one thing I want to stress too, and I can't say this enough, especially for new readers, is that you are not obligated to read for anyone you don't really want to read for. So it's up to you. I think it's good to explain to the person why you won't read for them and not let them just wonder. But I remember when we started the Bodhi Tree, one of the other readers had this article in the paper, and it was basically in a magazine. And basically the author, what they were saying was that they were chastising this other reader because the other reader had found out one of their clients was a pedophile, and they didn't want to read for them anymore because they were so offended. And this person was saying, well, you're not being very professional. You should be able to set aside your feelings and rise above that. And I'm thinking, no, the reader did the right thing. If she felt she couldn't be objective with this person because she really just disliked them so much, then she shouldn't be reading for them, if you can't maintain your objectivity. So she did the exact right thing by saying, I'm not the person to work with you. This isn't right. And so for me, again, trust it. You have to trust. And ultimately, a magical life always comes down to trust at some point. You have to trust the universe to provide. You have to trust that the next day the sun will come up, and you can't live in fear if you're going to live a magical life. You just have to believe.
It's true. And I think that one of the things I have found with magic, it's okay if you're not always like actively doing spells and things, that there's a cycle for that. So I know when we first came out here, because, we did need money, I do remember doing quite a few prosperity spells. And I do think they helped because it got us where we needed to go. And I only started doing them again a little bit, and only a little bit at the beginning of the pandemic. I mostly was doing other kinds of spell work, so I kind of shift depending on what's going on. But I think that idea, for me, it's also about having an attitude that the world really is magical. And if I simply have that attitude, I can find even a little bit of magic every day, which I always try to do. I try to see something magical and let the universe present what that is. So not, again, necessarily feeling I have to always consciously manipulate and control the magic.
Yeah, and I think we do magic a lot. I think whether we're conscious of it all the time. I sometimes think we've transcended it in the sense that we don't need to do a lot of ritual anymore. I just think it and have confidence that it will happen. So I think sometimes that's the magic. But yeah, I think that you just have to have that faith and confidence and belief and trust. I think that's such a big part of it. And one thing I would suggest too is to, and we see this a lot with readings too sometimes, is that, have that faith. So if you're going to do a spell and you're going to do the spell and then you're going to trust it's going to work, don't keep redoing it every other day. Trust your magic, trust that it will unfold. But also I think the universe has its own timing. So sometimes it may unfold the next day, sometimes it may take a while. But that doesn't mean if it's taking a while that it's not working. You just have to continue to have the faith that your magic will work. And you have to kind of believe in it. You don't just sit around and hold your breath,
I totally agree with that as well. I mean, that's again, now one thing we did notice when we first came out here, which was interesting, is that there's a difference between West Coast and East Coast energies enough that you have to learn what it is. And if you think about, for instance, the element that's really strong here is the fire element because of all the forest fires and then the earthquakes. And it was, so we did find initially sometimes what we would normally do in the East Coast was not quite connecting, and we adjusted according to our environment. And I don't remember consciously how we adjusted, but I do remember talking about that with Michael. We were saying this is different out here, the way the energies are.
Yeah, and I think part of, again, magic is to harmonize with your environment. But I remember waking up in the mornings here when I first moved to the West Coast, and I'd be dizzy in the mornings. I'd be very disoriented because the energies were so different than what I was used to on the East Coast with all the granite solidness. And here the earth is moving and shaking, and there are volcanoes, and the ocean, which was on the east side, is now on the west, and that confused me. So for me, again, it took several weeks for me to really adapt, and then it kind of went away. But I remember the first few weeks that I'd get up in the morning and I'd be almost dizzy.
Oh, I don't remember that happening to you, but I definitely remember us talking about that and being sort of like impressed that it was such a noticeable difference, from our point of view anyway. I did want to talk a little bit about how the early days of working on, I think the public call it Venice Boardwalk, but it's really by the Venetians call it Oceanfront Walk. And when we came in the 90s, it was still at its heyday with vendors of all kinds. And you could still make a fair amount of money on the weekends, particularly in the summer. And there were some great artists that would sell their wares. But we didn't have much money, as we said earlier. So Michael's initial setup that he used it was from the 99-cent store, these little children's plastic chairs and this little table without any kind of umbrella. And so, we didn't wait to have the perfect setup. And so what he did, though, is as he got money, he started to invest in his setup so that it would be more comfortable for him and the people getting readings. So eventually it became quite a comfortable setup. But every day he would have to wheel it out on a cart from Lincoln Boulevard when he lived at Lincoln Place, and then come to the boardwalk and try and get a spot. And that was sometimes very competitive, trying to get a spot. So I'll let Michael share a little of his stories about that.
Yeah, I don't know if I would call it competitive. I think it was brutally cutthroat at times. I mean, people were savage about it, and it was definitely law of the jungle, and you had to sort of compete for your space. So it was what it is. But again, the nice part was as we were there, we kind of established a little community that would take care of each other. There was the Stacy and Kim that had their butterfly things that they did, and the girl that had the light bulbs, and another
Felicia,
guy, Felicia, and we had Jonas that was the butterfly, or the Jamaican guy. So we had all kinds of cool people, and we became kind of a little community of people that would sort of look after each other and take care of each other. So it really made it a lot easier. So, but a lot of it is, again, you integrate, and we learned how to play by the rules that are on Venice Beach, and we learned to integrate, and we learned to make it work, and But I think sometimes, and again, yes, magic can sometimes be making things conform to your will, but I think also sometimes you have to conform to the universe around you a little bit too. It kind of works both ways.
It's true. I remember it was really nice because if you didn't have that little community around you, you never know who was going to set up next to you, and there was some pretty rough characters, and I mean really like criminal characters, and so Michael sort of formed also a protective unit. He would sort of take care of people around him because he was never really afraid to sort of stand up to things. Like if the cops were trying to harass someone, Michael knew how to talk to policemen because he was a cop a long time ago for a little while. And so it was really nice. He'd have, I remember the butterfly, they made these beautiful butterfly hair things and before anyone else was doing it, and the light bulbs were painted. And so it was a very colorful, artistic energy around, and did, like Michael say, it formed like a little community, and they all got along really well, I remember. I thought it was really funny, though. There was one summer I remember where it was so competitive to get any kind of space that Michael started hiring this one homeless man the night before just to sleep at a spot.
Yeah, I mean, you do what you got to do to survive, right?
And
it helped him out.
Homeless man.
Helped him out. It helped me out. So yes, we did stuff like that. Shout out to our friend Lance. He helped us out a lot. He was a character there on the beach that we fell in love with and still love dearly. So, but yeah, you become part of the world around you, and you blend your energies with it, and you harmonize with it, and you make it work. You make it work for you.
Now, the other interesting thing that when we first came out here in the 90s and we were building up our reputation as readers through the Bodhi Tree bookstore primarily, was we were still quite invisible in that they did not have a website front for the readers, and they did put us in their little brochures. They had the events, so we were there. And so in the beginning, we sat outside and there was just no business at all. And it was cold, and at that time they didn't have like a little roof that they put in later. So, it would sometimes rain in the room, and we would sit there anyway on our shifts, all of us, and build up our clients one at a time. And we were very consistent, patient. It was lonely at times, if nothing else, because we were kind of back there by ourselves in that little sort of alcove that we had. But it worked, so we built it up very gradually. But the Bodhi Tree did have a good reputation, but for whatever reason, we as readers started having very good reputation. And I will say that we did all get along. When I later worked at other places, I realized that that's not common. And there's probably a couple reasons for it, but I did my best as the person that hired the readers to cultivate a supportive environment. And so even though, maybe we had an ego thing now and then, like I'm technically better than this person, we still supported each other. Like if someone got a party, we'd say, hey, Darylyn, do you want to come to this party? We would recommend each other as readers. We just did that. And it was a small group. But still, I think it was because of the tone that I set, because I wanted people to support each other. I wanted this. I didn't think it should be competitive. I thought there was room for everybody. So what happened was that even though we didn't have any advertisement, word of mouth was really powerful. And we've talked about it before on a show where I think Michael mentioned somebody heard about me on a plane from someone talking about me, which was really bizarre. But that's how important word of mouth is. In fact, we still get people from the Bodhi Tree era, because we have, fairly distinctive names. They can find us and say, hey, you read for me, at the Bodhi Tree, and I really loved the reading, and I looked for you, and I found you again. And I think that even though I know social media is hugely important, I know getting out there is, I still feel having some sense that word of mouth in the reading business is still very, very important.
One of the things I'm really proud about at the Bodhi Tree that you sort of touched on is when we first started there were basically 5 readers, me and Krista and 3 others. And we were there, 14 years or so? And at the end of it, we still had 4 of the 5 original readers. We had virtually no turnover. And the one person that did leave left of his own accord. So we hired somebody else to replace him. But at the end of the day, we just had virtually no turnover in 14 years. Where I've worked at other places where they churn through readers like you go through underwear. It's just a new person every other day, coming and going. But we really tried to keep the people that we had and make it a positive experience for them. And I think that was a testament to how well we were able to choose people and how well they worked together, and sometimes chosen for us. But we made it work really well. And I think it was a mutual respect. And I think and some of that goes to the Bodhi Tree too, because to be honest, those guys really didn't pressure us that if you don't make, an extra $3 a week, we're going to get rid of you or anything. That they were very spiritual, and they believed that as long as you're doing good, as long as you're helping people, that's all we care about is our reputation. And we just don't want you doing anything to mess that up, which we didn't. But they really supported us, and I think that they really did understand that there was more to it than just making money with readings, that we really did want to help others, and that was something they really got behind.
They did. They really let us do our own thing there. And they didn't interfere with that at all. And I never, ever, even though I know at one point we would book a week ahead, and we'd be booked up and we would work, I don't know, about 4 days a week there, 4 days and nights, and long shifts. And so we were getting to the point we had enough of a reputation. And then we eventually did get them to put in these like signs so that people could walk by and see the sign that their reading's there, because we were a little too literally invisible. And that's a whole story that I don't know if we'll have time. That's really funny though. But they did. I do appreciate they supported, us as readers in terms of, you never felt like, suddenly I have to produce like, 50% more. They weren't like that at all. And we did have that kind of freedom, but also I think they liked that we got a good reputation too. So we made them look good. And we did, people trusted the readers there, because I think no matter what the level, they were honest and authentic. So that's one of the things we looked for if I was to hire. But even the original ones kind of started off, they were just, decent people, I would say, and, but Michael's right. We kept the consistency, because I think that's important if you want to build up a business as a group of readers, that you have consistent readers. And you can certainly have what we had for new readers. We'd have the fill-in readers, and they would fill in for when we wanted a vacation, or if somebody was sick, or that kind of thing. And then what would happen is if a fill-in reader was good, and then somebody wanted to drop a shift, which did happen, then they got that shift first. So they got a priority.
But as I said, at the same time, don't feel like you have to work at a bookstore if you're just starting on this journey. Find a place that's your own and make it your own. And that's really awesome too. We've done that before, and it's been some of the most fun places we've done readings are places you wouldn't expect a reader. As I said, a little cafe or coffee shop or something in the neighborhood. There's all kinds of places that are open to it. And, I'd walk in off the street and say, look, I would love to do readings a couple afternoons here a week, and we'll split whatever we make 50-50. And are you okay with that? And they'd say, sure, let's give it a shot. It might be a fun promotion. So there, never hurts to ask. And I think, again, if you're going to live a magical life, don't be afraid to ask. I think sometimes you just have to have that faith and trust and put things out there. And the worst they can do is say no. So we've always done that. And then we've always sort of trusted that the right opportunities will present themselves. And I think over our life, they kind of have,
Yeah, it's so true. And especially nowadays, I think because readings are definitely more popular than ever, that there probably are businesses that would take a risk. I do remember getting hired one summer for, it was, what's the name of that? It was like a famous cosmetic shop, and I can't remember. And I think it was Christy Turlington's line, and they wanted a palm reader. And I would come in and they would buy some products and get a free palm reading. Fred Siegel, I worked there for one summer, but it was their idea. They were looking, and I was not a lot of people do palm reading, so they found me through the bookstore, I think, Bodhi Tree bookstore. So, but I thought it was a very cool promotion, and people definitely liked it, and it just got them to encourage them to buy the products because they got the free palm reading.
I'll tell you guys a funny Hollywood story that just crossed my mind, which is really interesting, was that at one point we got invited to do readings for the premiere of the movie The Gift, which had Keanu Reeves, and I forget the name of the actress that was in it. I should know. Krista and I are not starstruck, as you can tell, but she's well known. Kate Blanchett, I think it was. Yeah.
Kate, yeah.
And so anyway, we get invited to do readings at this premiere we do, and then get invited to the movie. And one of the things about readers is that everybody has their own signature. It's like an artist, there's certain style of delivery or certain things that you look at that say, okay, that's that very distinct signature. Just like if you hear Stevie Ray Vaughan play guitar for somebody else, it's him because there's a certain phrasing that's just his. That's stylistic, and so we have that. And so we go to the movie after they gave us tickets to the movie, and Kate Blanchett's doing this tarot reading, and she's using Krista's signature, which was really cool. And then Krista remembered that somewhere a couple years before that, she'd been doing a reading for a screenwriter who was researching for a project she was working on. So we sort of suspect that Krista was a big influence. So that was really funny.
Yeah, it was just our theory. And she was actually using those psychic cards with the symbols but there was something about, and I do have a very, kind of specific way of reading that you don't, and so does Michael. And we did get a chuckle out of that because, as readers, I'm sure many of you know people especially before Google. So this was before Google and easily researching things, that you definitely would have people coming to ask you, can we use your knowledge for research for this particular creative project or that kind of thing. So it was actually quite common. And I was always pretty open to talking to people. I said, sure, why not? I didn't get paid. I just thought I'm going to be helpful and give something away that I really enjoy talking about.
To talk about the show you did for the show in Japan.
The one in Japan, is that the travel show?
Yeah, remember that they filmed you and then what they showed after?
Oh yeah, so this was it was a travel show, and I was doing a reading for one of our clients actually, and they paid me actually quite well for the time. They paid me I think $200, which was good for me for like the hour. So I did this whole reading, and then what they showed was only my hands. And they also cut a lot of the reading itself. And then they spent a lot of time with this person walking up a hill. But I thought, whatever, I got paid. And I did reconnect with a friend of mine who saw that show on the Travel Channel. And she knew how to reach me. So I was like, but it was very odd, what they decided to edit out. I didn't mind that they edited me out, but it was odd what they replaced it with.
Yeah, and one of the things I think that's been so great about this is the people we've met along the way, and that's what's made this magical as much as anything, is the incredible people we've connected with, that we've gotten to become friends with, or even just passing through, that have just been an amazing influence or person. And so to me, it's the people that we've met that has made this a magical life, and a magical adventure as much as the tarot. And that continues. I mean, I still meet people to this day through it that I'm just like, this is cool. These are really cool people, and we've had a lot of fun with that.
It's really true. There are some people that I even only read for them once, and I'll always remember them because of just their character, their situation. People have really touched me with their openness and vulnerability of what they share with me. I've sometimes been a little horrified even what people have shared with me, though of course I wouldn't show that, but I'm just like, all right, if that's necessary to say, go right ahead. Because I've always had this, I don't know what it is. People like to tell me things. It's always been with me. It's just part of who I am. They'll just sit down in a bus stop and they'll tell me their secrets. And that's just my aura for some reason.
I would say that as a piece of advice too, just to leave, because I know we're getting almost out of time. If you're going to live a magical life, if you're going to be a reader in particular, try hard to keep your heart in the right place. Try and do good. Try and care a lot about the people that you're interacting with and working with. Put their needs first and foremost. But try and stay pure when it comes to your motives and whatnot. And yes, you can make a good living with it, and we've been blessed to pay our rent and so forth with magic. And doing tarot, but at the same time, it's not about the money, and it should never be about the money. It should always be about doing good. And if you can keep your purity of intent, I think it makes a big difference. And I think that leads to success. I think that when people know that it's not about the money with you, it's that you really want to help, you really want to be that person that can benefit their life. I think that that's what makes you successful.
Well, I think that is absolutely true. And Michael and I have sort of stayed true to our values in that way. And sure, I've gotten burnt out at times and frustrated, but I still try to work from that center core beingness. And I think that it has brought opportunities to me that I personally would have never, ever thought I'd last this long as a reader. And because it started out just, okay, I'll try this, and I didn't really see the future in it, to tell you the truth. So I think it was just the way we showed up and we kept going and we started really, living our beliefs in magic as much as we could.
Yeah. And, again, I know we're running out of time. I just give a shout out to all of our magical friends. You all know who you are and we all love you. And we're thankful for you being part of our journey. So I'll kick it back to you, Krista, to wrap up. But I'm out of things to say.
Yes, and it is true. We do have quite a few magical friends, and we're really fortunate. Maybe I take it for granted that we can live in magic in ease. I don't have to hide it, and I haven't had to hide it for decades, and I feel blessed for that. And I am blessed for the people that have come on this journey with me and continue to, particularly Michael, I feel, and my animal friends. So thank you all for tuning in today. I look forward to seeing you next time as we continue to explore the esoteric and the obscure together, and I hope you have a most magical week.